Hello and welcome to another Magic the Gathering draft video. It's Al here with you, and this is how to draft MTG. In this video we're talking about drafting blue-green frogs in Bloomburrow Limited. As always, please click like and subscribe to support the channel and leave a comment just to say hello or to give me some feedback. Let me know what you would like to see in future videos. Blue-green frogs is a tier 2 strategy in Bloomburrow Limited. It's not one of the best decks, but it has the potential to be a very powerful deck if you get the right cards for it. It is a mid-range, long-game style of deck and is not particularly aggressive. It is trying to get into the end game where it can overwhelm your opponent. Its theme is blinking, meaning exiling and returning your creature to play, or bouncing, returning it to your hand and replaying your creatures. You want to look for creatures with good enters effects, as you're going to be getting to trigger those multiple times over the course of the game. Blue-green needs good card selection to find the pieces it needs when it needs them, and ways to interact with your opponent's creatures, as blue and green do not have great removal intrinsically. The key uncommons for blue-green frogs: Patchwork Banner, the 3-mana artifact. You choose a creature type, and those creatures get +1/+1, and it taps for a mana of any color. Blue-green is going to amass a pretty big board of frogs, so Patchwork Banner is going to do some work for you there. It's also a pretty mana-hungry deck, so getting the additional mana from the banner is going to help out with that. Hunter's Talent is the 1 and a green class enchantment. When it enters, target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature you don't control. Just one of the best green uncommons. You can pay 1 and a green to level it up, so when you attack, target attacking creature gets +1/+0 and gains trample until end of turn. And for 3 and a green, you can level it to level 3 at the beginning of your end step. If you control a creature with power 4 or greater, draw a card. Because this is a longer game deck, not only do you benefit from the removal aspect of Hunter's Talent, but you will get to a point in the game where you can get it to level 4 and have it take over the game for you. Brambleguard Veteran is 1 green for a 3/4 raccoon. It says whenever you expend 4 raccoons you control, get +1/+1 and gain vigilance until end of turn. This is just a really nice blocker for you early, and then later in the game you're going to have lots of ways to spend your mana, returning your creatures to your hand and recasting them. This should trigger pretty reliably for you and becomes a big threat that your opponents have to deal with. Overprotect is 1 and a green for an instant. It says target creature you control gets +3/+3, trample, hexproof, and indestructible until end of turn. In a longer game deck, you're going to be playing bigger creatures, investing more mana into them, and you do not want them to get killed by cheap removal spells, so you want to have ways to protect them. It also helps in situations where you need to block. If you're behind against an aggressive deck, you can make sure that your creature won't die and you're going to win that combat almost no matter what. Splash Lasher is 3 and a blue for a 3/3 frog with offspring 1 and a blue. When it enters, you tap up to 1 target creature and put a stun counter on it. Cards like this are very important in this deck, as you need ways to slow down your opponent, disrupt their creatures, and buy yourself time to set up your game plan. This is a card that gets better as the game goes on, as when you return it to your hand to recast it and you have more mana, you can then offspring it and tap down 2 of their creatures and slowly take over the game that way. Shoreline Looter is 1 and a blue for a 1/1 rat that can't be blocked. It says when it deals combat damage to a player, draw a card, then discard a card unless you have 7 or more cards in your graveyard. So this will help filter your draws early, making sure you hit your lands when you need to, and then gets rid of lands for you when you don't need them. And then when you get into the late game, this is just straight up drawing a card for you every turn. This is the top blue uncommon and fits super well in this deck. Hivespine Wolverine is 3 green for a 5/4. When it enters, you choose 1, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control, or the Wolverine fights a creature token, or destroy target artifact or enchantment. And if you're blinking this, you get to use whichever ability you need at any given time. This is the best place for Hivespine Wolverine. The signpost uncommon for the deck is Lily Splash Mentor, 2 green for a 4/4 frog with reach. Has the ability 1 green to exile another target creature you control, then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control with a +1/+1 counter on it. Activate only as a sorcery. So this is just a big boy for 4 mana that can block a lot of things for you, and it turns on all your enters the battlefield effect creatures. Unfortunately, it's sorcery speed, so you can't block and blink, which is a really nice ability for decks like this, but this still will take over the game if unchecked. Three Tree Scribe is 1 and a green for a 2/3 frog. Whenever it or another creature you control leaves the battlefield without dying, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. So a nice early blocker for you that gives you a bit of a payoff when you start exiling or bouncing your own creatures. In terms of key commons, the most important one is Pond Prophet. This is hybrid green blue for a 1/1 frog. When it enters, draw a card. This is the premium target for all your bouncing and blinking effects, and you really want to have a few of these in a frog's deck. Polywallop is another key one. This is 3 and a green for an instant. Costs 1 less to cast for each frog you control. It says target creature you control deals damage equal to twice its power to target creature you don't control. So in a dedicated frogs deck, this is often going to cost 2 or even just 1 mana. It's instant speed. It's going to kill most things that you need to kill. It doesn't have to target a frog either, so if you just have a big Wolverine or something, you can use that. Unfortunately, it is so good that other decks are going to try and take it from you, so you won't always reliably be able to get these, so make sure you prioritize them, as this is really the only pure removal spell this deck has access to. Cash Grab is 1 and a green for an instant. Mill 4 cards. You may put a permanent card from among the cards milled this way into your hand. If you control a squirrel or return to squirrel in this way, create a food token. Not at its best in blue-green, but will make sure that you hit your land drops if you need to, and will find you the pieces that you need to set up a combo later in the game. Sticky Tongue Sentinel is your common enabler for this deck. 2 and a green for a 3/3 frog with reach. When it enters, return up to 1 other target permanent you control to its owner's hand. So this will set up reusing your enters effect creatures. It can also return lands to your hand, which sounds like a bad thing, and it is most of the time. But if it's turn 5 and you don't have a 5th land to play, you can play this, return a tapped land to your hand, play that land again, and cast a 2-drop, which is a nice little extra piece of utility for this card. A couple of nice common cards with good enters effects. Tree Guard Duo, 3 and a green for the 3/4 frog rabbit. When it enters, until end of turn, target creature you control gains vigilance and +X/+X, where X is the number of creatures you control. Getting to trigger this every turn is going to give you a lot of good attacks against your opponent. And Sunshower Druid, this is another premium one. Single green for a 0/2 frog. When it enters, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature and you gain 1 life. It's nice and cheap, so when you're returning it to your hand with something like Sticky Tongue Sentinel, you'll more often have the mana to recast it. It's going to help you build up a board to block opposing aggressive creatures and give you a little life total padding to boot. Rust Shield Rampager is 3 and a green for a 4/4 with Offspring 2, and it can't be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less. Not a ton of synergy, but just some good stats, and you're happy to play this in mostly any green deck. And a couple of decent but not premium removal spells here. Dire Downdraft is 3 and a blue for an instant, costs 1 less to cast if it targets an attacking or tapped creature, and it puts that creature on the top or bottom of the opponent's library. It's their choice. Longstock Brawl is single green for a sorcery. Target creature you control fights target creature you don't control, and if you gift them a 1/1 blue fish that's tapped, you get a +1/+1 counter on your creature. So neither of these are super reliable, but they are kind of a necessary inclusion in a deck like this. A couple more nice enters effects, although these will be contested by the other drafters, so don't expect to get these super late. Head of the Homestead, 3 green for a 3/2. Makes 2 rabbits when it comes in, and Baker's Bane Duo, 1 and a green for a 2/2 that makes a food when it comes in. In terms of rares that could pull you into this deck if you take them early, Fecund Greenshell, 3 green for a 4/6 with reach. As long as you control 10 or more lands, creatures you control get +2/+2, and whenever this or another creature you control with toughness greater than its power enters, look at the top card of your library. If it's a land, you may put it onto the battlefield tapped, otherwise put it into your hand. You're going to be replaying your creatures and blinking them quite a bit, so you're going to get a lot of triggers off of this, which is obviously super excellent, and it's a nice body. 4/6 with reach is really hard to attack through, so this is going to stabilize you as well. Dreamdew Entrancer is 2 green for a 3/4 frog with reach. When it enters, tap up to 1 target creature and put 3 stun counters on it. If you control that creature, draw 2 cards. So that second part there I don't think is going to matter all that much. It is cute though, but most of the time you're just going to be tapping an opponent's creature and locking it down for 3 turns, which is honestly a lot like killing it. And if you get to replay this a bunch, you're going to be locking down their whole board and taking care of things from there. If you do want to target your own creature, of course you get to draw 2 cards, and if you have a way of blinking or bouncing that creature, then you get around the negative effect of it being stunned for 3 turns. Lumra, Bellow of the Woods, is 4 green for a legendary creature with vigilance and reach. It has power and toughness equal to the number of lands you control. When it enters, you mill 4 cards and return all land cards from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So just a big creature. You're not too interested in re-triggering this, but as the game goes longer, it's just going to get huge, and that's exactly what a deck like this wants. Season of Weaving is 4 blue for a sorcery. You choose up to 5 paw prints worth of modes, and you may choose the same mode more than once. For 1 paw, draw a card. For 2 paws, choose an artifact or creature you control and create a token that's a copy of it. For 3 paws, return each non-land, non-token permanent to its owner's hand. So I think most often you're going to want to do the 2 plus the 3. You're going to make a token copy of something, hopefully get a nice enters the battlefield effect, and then bounce everything on the board, resetting your opponent's board and resetting all your creatures to your hand so you can get their enters the battlefield effects again. But depending on the board state, if your opponent has a lot of creatures, then you can just clone 2 things of yours and draw a card, and the buyout clause of 6 mana, draw 5 is also quite good. Glarb Calamity's Augur is next. This is black, green, blue for a 2/4 frog with Death Touch. It says you may look at the top card of your library at any time. You may play lands and cast spells with mana value 4 or greater from the top of your library. It also has the ability Tap Surveil 2. So this is a card you will need to splash, so make sure that you have access to some mana fixing, minimum 3 sources of black mana to splash Glarb. If you can pull that off, it's going to be super worthwhile. Innkeeper's Talent is 1 and a green for the class enchantment. At the beginning of combat on your turn, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. For 1 green, you can make it level 2. Permanents you control with counters on them have ward 1. And for 3 and a green, it becomes level 3, and it doubles the amount of counters your creatures get, so they'll get 2 instead of 1. Just a really solid, strong card. Takes over the game. The longer the game goes, the better it is, and that is exactly what this deck is trying to do. Season of Gathering is 4 green for a sorcery. Choose up to 5 paw prints worth of modes. For 1 paw, put a +1/+1 counter on a creature you control, and it gains vigilance and trample until end of turn. For 2 paws, choose artifact or enchantment and destroy all permanents of the chosen type. And for 3 paws, draw cards equal to the greatest power among creatures you control. But most often, you're either going to be putting a +1/+1 counter on each of your creatures, giving them vigilance and trample and attacking for the win, or doing that to 2 creatures and drawing a pile of cards, and occasionally you'll want to destroy artifacts or enchantments. Just a really good, versatile, powerful card. Tender Wild Guide is 1 and a green for a 2/2 with Offspring 2. Taps for a mana of any color, or it taps to put a +1/+1 counter on itself. So a nice splash enabler. This deck is very mana hungry. It's returning its creatures and replaying them. So you're happy even with the Offspring having 2 of these, 2 extra mana. And of course, the longer the game goes, the bigger these get. Finally, we've got Dour Portmage, which is 1 and a blue for a 1/3 frog. It says whenever 1 or more other creatures you control leave the battlefield without dying, draw a card. And it's got the activated ability 1 and a blue, tap, return another target creature you control to its owner's hand. You can do that at instant speed. So this does allow you to block something with your Pond Prophet and then return it to hand before damage is dealt to save it, and then play it again later and draw more cards. This is a really nice build around for the blue-green frogs deck. So this is certainly one of the coolest decks, if not the coolest deck to draft in the format. It's not the most powerful, but it does have some really good rares, and when it comes together, it can be quite strong. In terms of pros, blue will likely become underdrafted over time as people learn that it is the weakest color. And I'm already noticing in my drafts that I'm seeing a lot of blue cards late in the pack. So if you are in green, this is the best home for the good blue cards. This deck has good commons that other decks don't want, Pond Prophet being the main one, but also Polywallop to a degree. Cash Grab and Dire Downdraft, other key commons, they go late in the draft, currently pick 6 and beyond. So that's another nice benefit of being in this deck when you're drafting. In terms of cons, the deck does not have much removal, and the other decks are going to try and take your Polywallops, so make sure you prioritize them if you think you're going to end up in green-blue. It also leans heavily on green, with blue being a bit more of a support color, and green will likely be contested as the format matures and people realize that it is one of, if not the, best color in the format. That's going to do it for this one. Thank you so much for watching. Please click like and subscribe to support the channel and leave me a comment. Say hey. Let me know what you'd like to see in the future. You can always reach me at howtodraftmtg@gmail.com. blooburrow.com if you have any questions or would like to inquire about private coaching. As always, thanks so much for watching. Until next time, bye for now.